Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series, Charting Your Digital Future. My name is Harry Blanche, and I'm the CEO of the Document Warehouse Digital. Today I'll be presenting the second part of our three-part series in which we discuss next level finance and HR, harnessing digital transformation. Now, for some, you may be returning as a second attendee to these webinars, but for others, this might be your first webinar. So we'll do a quick recap of what was discussed in the last session. We last time shone a light on the fact that most of the business processes work in the dark. We spoke about lighthouse projects, which often are done in silos, where departments gain value from a product, but often are unaware of potential value that could be brought to those departments by the product. What we're talking about today, though, is context of information management or document management. We asked ourselves, how could we change this? How can we shine this proverbial light on these various departments to ensure that all of these departments gain good insight on information that could be spread across the company? So we introduced a product called the Digital Launchpad. It's powered by mFiles, a leading global provider of information management systems, and have been around for over 20 years. We provide in the Launchpad 6 business-related workflows that can be applied across all or some departments, from document approval, which we covered in the last session, leave, help desk, payment requisition approval, expense claim, and contract management. What that means for you is when investing in a product like mFiles and applying the Digital Launchpad, the time to value is much quicker than starting from a zero base. We have pre-built structures and processes which help accelerate the adoption of the product. It has an intuitive user interface. The Launchpad is free for all our mFiles customers, and the system remains customizable to your company's requirements. With the solution also being available via mobile, web, and desktop, it also gives a way to access the system from various sources. Today, we'll dive into a little bit more detail. So today we'll discuss a little bit about finance and HR, often the core of any business. I don't think there's a business that doesn't have an HR or finance department. If we look at these departments, we often find there's various processes that run at each of these departments. If we look at finance, we have capital approval process, expense claim, payment requisitions, PO approvals, quotes, could be budget approvals, etc. On the HR side, we have things like leave approval, employee onboarding, employee offboarding, internal or external type of hire, and many others that could apply to these processes within a department. But what we find is the standard approach to these business processes don't work. And let me explain perhaps why. If we look at this picture, we find that when we look at these processes, there's no consistency typically within a department across these processes. For example, if we do a capital approval process, we might be using an electronic form, printing it for signature or sending it off for digital signing, and that may be done with or without email. An expense claim might be done by an Excel sheet and sent off to finance or sent out as a PDF as proof. Payment requisition, we might be emailing the invoice to accounts and they might be capturing it on the ERP system where they approve it there. PO approval might happen purely in the accounting system. On the leave side, we might have an electronic form with a signing for leave approval, and so it goes on. The point of the matter is that we often see that we have silos, if not silos, within silos of information being created, no transparency in where this information is. We can't measure what these processes are doing. Or at the end of the day, if you're a new employee, you might not even know where to find the processes that have been completed. So you sit very much in a situation where we have a ton of siloed information where we are unable to utilize or benefit from this information in a meaningful way. So what if the information you need came to you? Maybe look at it a bit differently. What if the information silos of your business could be consolidated? Not saying you'll just have one silo of information, but surely there's a better way to do what you're doing now. And what if information in the business could be connected? So utilizing metadata, utilizing external information from those ERPs, from those accounting systems, those HR systems, to better connect that information within a system, all whilst it remains secure. We try to create a single platform where we are able to have this information set accessible from various locations, from various points of view, but while keeping the security of that intact. Let's look at an example of that. John is your employee. He submits an expense claim. He also is requesting leave. Now he's going through this process and he wants to view all this information related to himself. In the standard business process, you may need to access the information like this. And of course, this is a worst case. I'm sure this is not the typical way this happens. John walks to HR, speaks to the HR manager, asks about his leave status, and maybe a few hours later receives a mail back from the HR manager with the status of that leave. Or he heads over to finance, talks to Brian, who's not in, comes back a few hours later, asks him about when he's getting paid for his expense. 2 hours later, he hears nothing, sends out to follow up, and waits for Brian's response. We typically find that processes are so people-centric and so reliant on information systems that aren't systems. So if we look at things like email, things like folder type structures where we try and move information to mimic a workflow type structure, or require people to tell us where and when something has been done. It's often the frustration people find within an organization when dealing with certain processes. So what we're going to try and do is see how we can help you do this better. So let's flip into a demo. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I've opened up mFiles. mFiles being the information management system we built the Digital Launchpad on. It's an intuitive interface system where a user will interact through a normal intuitive way of folder-like views, but also experience the normal Windows type look and feel of the system. So what I'm going to do is mimic these two processes. I will represent myself as John and take you through the steps in the process to get the leave approved, see at any point what the status is of that leave, do the same for my expense claim, attach the invoice related to my expense claim. Could be done via mobile phone. I'm going to use the desktop app. We're going to get that approved, and then we'll jump into a finance process and do the same. What we'll also look at is how we can view that information, one from an employee's perspective, but also from the department perspective. So look at the different ways we look at the same information within the same platform. So to start off, I'm going to create a new leave request. So I'll start by creating one for myself, setting out my leave that I'm applying for, the dates, number of holidays, none, and 1 day leave. Now, I'm just going to pause here. Of course, we don't have to work in isolation and not, for instance, talk to an HR system. We could pull information about available leave days from that system, or communicate back and forth to that system to say, okay, this person's leave has been approved, and capture that automatically into the system, or route that via HR to capture. For now, we'll keep it simple and simply create this leave. Now, my manager is Anne, and Anne will receive an email notification letting her know that there's a new assignment for her to do, a task that requires attention. So I'm going to log in as Anne and go to my assigned section of my system. If all works out, I'll just refresh. There we go. Receive a task to say, okay, we've got a request for myself to take leave, and it's for 1 day, and status is pending. So Anne has a decision to make to either approve it, decline it, ask for it to be corrected, maybe tomorrow is too soon, or if it's another type of leave, there might be supporting documents required. For this matter, we'll simply approve it. There's no urgent matter for me to attend to tomorrow, so she'll grant me the leave. Once that's done, her task is complete, her inbox is effectively cleared, and I'll get a notification back from the system indicating that my leave has been approved. I'll flip back to my user, and I can now see in one of a few places what's happened to that leave. I can go to my recent items within the system, and if all goes well, within a few seconds, there we go, we have our leave approved. So real-time approval. And I could also go into my work area within the system and see what leave has been taken and what's been approved. So within my area of work, I'll go to my leave, and I can see, for instance, my leave has been approved. So here we have a full record of leave that's been taken. Type of leave should be accessible as well. So it gives us a good record for our own sake to know what's going on. For the same matter, if we were to look at it from an HR point of view, HR could go into their own view and view the same information by the employee file. So for my employee file, we would see, okay, what leave has Harry taken and what's been approved. And we'll see the same information within their space. Now, something just to note, throughout this process, we have a full audit trail of what is going on and who's approved what at what time. So during that process, we have a full auditable set of information that gives us that comfort to know who's been approving what information at what time. So there's measurability created through a process. And this is now a nice, simple way to illustrate that in terms of leave, because everyone takes leave. But of course, the process could be much more complex. And in that, being able to measure a process means we are able to better manage it and improve on it. For now, we'll go back to the home screen. And the second part of that requirement was to apply for my expense claim. So I'm going to start and create a new expense claim. And it'll be what was done yesterday. It was, if I can type, just for myself, just say, and an amount. So depending on what the requirement is of what needs to be captured, this is of course customizable, what fields of information is required to make it easy to find after we've saved it. I'm going to create it. Just going to my signed section. And I'm actually just from my other screen going to just copy a invoice that I'd like to attach to that process. So we'll have the invoice that's associated to this expense, and I want to send this expense off for approval. Now, again, according to the workflow rule, it will go to my manager. It could be different, but for this process, we then define Anne as being the person that will receive this task. Let's go back to Anne's work area, go to assign to section, and there we go. What you'll also see is when we create these type of information pieces or objects of information, we are eliminating the need for electronic forms, the need to email this type of request through to someone. We could also combine all expenses for a month and create a single expense approval for the month, summarize that expense total into a final total, things that can be done that doesn't need to be done in Siri, but rather be done as and when an employee captures that information, but trigger a process at the end of the month to send that off for the manager to approve, so that it get drips and drabs of information through the month. It's really up to how the process should work within the organization that we apply those necessary logic to it. For this, we also look at how that piece of information has been named. So it's been called the expense claim, the employee, and the date. Again, creating consistency in how we name information is quite important. Doesn't give people the freedom to just create what and how they want to do. Let's rephrase. Let them sort of create content the way they wish to within a system which gives them the freedom to do that. I think within a system like this, is controlled in terms of what can be created and what the naming convention is according to a company standard. It creates a continuity and consistency often lacking in most systems. For this, Anne looks at this, she views the expense, she sees, okay, there's an attachment, checks the amount, of course, happy with that, and approves that. Again, same feedback loop can go back to me if in more information is required, but for this, I'll approve it. So now both my expense and leave has been concluded. So again, within my work area, I have the same capability to go within my expense claim and find the relevant expense completed. So let's just refresh. That's actually today's. So we'll see that actually I've missed a step. That'll be probably why it hasn't been concluded. So Brian, the finance person, apologies, needs to pay me. So let's quickly go into that step and logging in as Brian to do so. So Brian will go check the approval. It's been done. It's awaiting payment, logs into his banking app, sends off the payment. Again, that once a month type payment rather than ad hoc could also be done. In this example, we're simply doing it on a case-by-case basis. He approves it. He downloads the POP, saves that as part of the information set, and concludes the process. Again, I could get a notification to say that this process has been completed. So if I now go back to my expense claims and I refresh, that expense claim is now closed. So the process very much sits within the system. Of course, some actions need to be taken outside, like in a banking app, sometimes within an accounting system, if you can't integrate into something like that, sometimes into an HR system, if you can't integrate into that. Depending on what that is, we support that process to ensure information still resides centrally. Also, supporting documents are within one space, and we connect that through metadata. So being able to see that information from the view of an employee or the view of an HR manager or the manager of that employee for that matter. So we're trying to eliminate the idea that information has to reside in all these different locations and spaces and keeping it in one central location. So from the next and last perspective, we'll take a look at a finance process as well. Excuse me. So from a finance process perspective, we've developed a simple payment requisition process. Now, we haven't looked at it from the start of the process where we do a 3 quote and then approve the quote, but that of course can be built up at the front of the process. But we've taken it from the point where we are able to submit an invoice. So we may have a PO for it and we're waiting for that invoice to be received. So for now, I'm going to create a payment requisition. So same principle, but we're now switching to the finance side of things. I'm going to create this requisition for today. My supplier is ABC. It relates to a certain department. Now, with that, we have certain approvers that will be approving this requisition. Let's just pause for 1 second on approvals as a whole. We can do it in various ways. So if we have, for instance, departmental approvals based on amount, we're saying this is a certain amount threshold to approve 1 or 2 people. That can be built into the system in terms of logic. If we have a budgeted or non-budgeted type matrix, if it's capital or non-capital type expense, etc., one could have different variations of approvers based on those requirements. So it's all about understanding your logic and how that needs to be applied to the system, but that could mimic your current paper or electronic based process that you may be following. For this, I'm just saying we ordered a new new high-speed scan. So the amount was 400,000 Rand, and I'll create the requisition. Now again, I create it from any point in the system. I don't need to be in a specific space or area. It then assigns it to me because it wants me to upload the invoice to be able to submit that for approval. So I'm just looking for the invoice and bring it into the system. So what will be different here is we now start applying a bit of AI into the system by being able to classify the document, understanding, okay, yes, the system understands this is an invoice, understands that this is the supplier, understands the date is the 20th of the 11th, 2023, understands the total including VAT is 115,000 Rand. It learns as it continues to get more of these type of invoices. So we can utilize some of the underlying technologies within M-Files to better capture and quickly capture information into the system which is relevant to a process. It might not be relevant to a process, it's just speed of capture. So if we look at that, we utilize things like smart classification, smart metadata to help us do that. I'll mention the generative AI capability very, very briefly at the end of the session, but we'll discuss it probably in the next session a bit more. So for this, I've created that we now have that document associated to the invoice, and I see that I missed the invoice number. So let's just add that quickly, copy paste that, save it, and we have that information. Again, creating a consistent naming of that document. Now I'll send it off for approval, and it will go from Brian to Anne for approval. And let's just get to the approval screen quickly. Let's see, refresh it. There we go. Again, process gets assigned to Brian. You would have received an email confirming that there's something to do. Again, approval or rejection based on what's required. So checking the document, seeing that everything is in order, and then applying the necessary logic to approve it. Moves out of his work area into Anne's, and then goes and does the same. Checks the necessary for approval. See that from the history that Brian had approved it a little bit earlier, and approves on her side if she's happy, or rejects it back to me, the creator, if there's something wrong. From there, again, flips back to Brian, who sits in finance to pay. Let's just make sure we do. Hopefully get that. See why. Check. Should be with Brian, but Brian hasn't received it. I'll quickly just check. Could be purely based on some other information. I've missed a step, needed to be assigned for payment. Apologies. So now Brian should be receiving that or not. Hopefully the system plays with me. Sorry about that. Still not. Had to happen somewhere in the demo where something went wrong. Apologies for that. What we'll do though quickly is just check on the last step of that process, is what would be added to that as well. So we will also have a POP added to that process, and of course, trying to apply the same logic, utilizing AI to identify the class of documents. So it's a POP, adding the supplier, finding the date on the document, being able to set that and creating that. So within that process, should be able to then see the requisition with its related documents. From a finance perspective, we can now go and see that information in our view, or even as an end user, be able to see the requisitions that I've created. So within my requisition space, I could see that currently it's awaiting payment, waiting Brian to get that task to complete that action. From a finance perspective, I can now look at that information from various perspectives. So let's look at it from, if we go into an accounts payable area of work, so we can view that information by supplier or by type and then supplier. So for ABC, we're able to see that invoice or that POP, but be able to see, okay, there's all the invoices for that supplier. Or from the other perspective, start with, I want to see all invoices and see that same information in a different context. So being able to really show information without duplicating information. I think that's a key component to this solution. So what we're trying to achieve is uncluttering the need for all these different areas of work, but be able to give the freedom to show information in certain contexts to users that need to work with it for specific reasons. So the idea is purely to help enable our end user to be more effective. We haven't touched search. We haven't touched some of the other functionalities. Again, just a snippet into the system, some of the processes related to finance and HR, trying to demystify some of the ways that we're trying to solve some of the more common challenges, creating a workspace, an area of how we are able to better manage, I think, company-wide information that is getting excessively uncontrolled in terms of where information should be found, where it should be saved, the amount of information we create, and in so really want to get a user or company going by utilizing a product like the Digital Launchpad. The last step in this is just to, again, thank you for your time and attention. I always try to do a last slide, but with all my screens, I'll try and do that. Great. So we will, this time, we had an issue last time with our recording, but we'll make sure that you'll be receiving your recording shortly after the session. Thank you for attending this session. We do appreciate the time you take to listen to what we have to offer. We look forward to hearing from you, and please feel free to reach out, and please look forward to our next event in our webinar series. Thank you.